My name is Claire. I'm 36, a quiet housewife living in the sleepy suburbs of Vermont. On the surface, my life was a picture of calm, charming home, a stable marriage, and a stepson on the cusp of adulthood. But the calm was only skin deep. Beneath it, things were different. My husband, Mark, worked in finance. His job kept him on the road most weeks, and I had grown used to spending my evenings alone. I tried to fill the silence gardening, cleaning, baking, but the ache of solitude had its own way of creeping in, no matter how many pies I pulled from the oven. Mark and I had been married for 3 years. He was kind, reliable, but something vital had withered between us long ago. Our conversations were transactional, our touch cold. And then, there was Eli. Eli was Mark's son from a previous marriage. He had just turned 20, broad-shouldered and sun-kissed from long hours at the gym. He carried himself with the restless arrogance of youth untamed, untouchable. We rarely spoke beyond casual pleasantries. There was a wall between us I never expected to cross. Until that night, rain tapped gently on the windows, and the air in the house was scented with lavender from a candle I had lit in the living room. I had curled up with a novel, trying not to notice how empty the house felt with Mark gone again. He had called to say his flight was delayed. He wouldn't be home until the next evening. I remember padding upstairs earlier than usual, feeling worn down by the silence. As I passed Eli's room, I heard a sound low, almost pained. Concern bloomed in my chest. Was he sick? Hurt? I didn't think. I just pushed the door open. And everything changed. I froze in place. Eli lay on his bed, body exposed, caught in a moment that should have remained unseen. His eyes met mine, but he didn't flinch, didn't cover himself. A slow, knowing smile curved his lips as if he had been waiting. Shame surged in me, hot and dizzying. I should have shut the door. I should have turned away. But I didn't. Something unspoken passed between us. Something dark, uninvited, but deeply human. I stepped inside without meaning to, as if pulled by a gravity I couldn't name. "Come here," he said, voice low and rough with breath. I should have run. Instead, I obeyed. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a confrontation, maybe regret, but all I found was heat. I sat on the edge of his bed, my hand trembling where it hovered near him. I didn't touch him, not really. But the way my fingers curled, the way my breath hitched everything about me betrayed what I truly wanted. "I can't," I whispered. "You already are," he said. And he wasn't wrong. We didn't cross that final linen knot yet, but something worse happened. The line blurred. I leaned in, brushing my lips to his cheek, barely more than a breath, but it lingered. It meant something. It broke everything. When I returned to my room, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, replaying every breath, every heartbeat. My body felt electric, haunted. What had I done? What was I becoming? The morning light poured through the window, casting golden rays across my bed, but I didn't feel warmth, only a dull, lingering ache. I lay still, tangled in the sheets, my body heavy with what had happened the night before. I kept trying to convince myself it had been nothing, just a strange, charged moment. A mistake. Surely. A lapse in judgment brought on by too many lonely nights and too little affection. But I couldn't shake the memory. Every breath Eli had taken, the look in his eyes, the way my body had responded like it had a will of its own. I finally forced myself out of bed, showered too long, scrubbing until my skin turned red. Still, I couldn't wash away the way I'd felt in that room, the way part of me had wanted to stay. I dressed quickly in a loose sweater and jeans, tying my hair back in a messy knot. I told myself I'd make breakfast, keep busy, keep breathing. By the time Mark came home that night, everything would go back to normal. I stepped into the kitchen and froze. Eli was already there, shirtless, a bowl of cereal in front of him. His golden skin glowed under the morning sun, every muscle moving with lazy confidence. His hair was damp, as if he'd just stepped out of the shower. He looked up when I entered. His gaze traveled down my body, slow and unashamed. I swallowed hard and turned to the fridge, pretending to look for anything. "Morning, Claire," he said, his voice low and amused. "Morning," I mumbled, my back still to him. "You look different today," he added, relaxed, glowing even. I slammed the fridge door harder than I meant to. "Eat your breakfast," I snapped. He chuckled softly, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Touchy," he murmured. I fumbled with the eggs, cracking 2 into a hot pan. My hands were shaking. I didn't look at him, didn't dare. "You don't have to pretend," he said after a moment, his voice quieter now. "I know you felt it too." I dropped the spatula. "Don't," I said, turning to face him. "We're not talking about this." His expression didn't change. That same knowing look lingered in his eyes, and it made something twist deep inside me. "You want it again," he said simply. "Don't lie." I stepped back, my voice trembling. "This was a mistake, Eli. When a thing happened." He moved closer, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off his skin. "You crossed the line last night," he whispered. "And you didn't run?" I hated him for being right. I hated how easily he could see through me. "No," I whispered, barely convincing even myself. He smiled, brushing past me to rinse his bowl in the sink. The moment was over, but something inside me had cracked open, and I didn't know how to close it again. I spent the rest of the morning in a fog, half aware of my surroundings, avoiding every shadow that looked like him. I waited for Mark's return with a sick pit in my stomach. When he finally came home that evening, I greeted him at the door. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and wrapped his arms around me. "You okay?" he asked, noticing how tense I was. "Just tired," I said. "Missed you." And that was true. I missed the version of my life where things were simple, where shame wasn't clinging to my skin and guilt didn't throb behind my ribs. I set the table, made small talk, laughed in the right places. But Eli sat across from me, calm and quiet, his foot brushing against mine under the table. It was subtle, calculated. I flinched, knocked over my glass of wine. Mark jumped up to help, concerned, asking if I was all right. I smiled through it, but inside, I was unraveling. Later, after dinner, Mark excused himself to shower. The moment his footsteps disappeared up the stairs, I turned only to find Eli already behind me. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me, daring me again. "I want you," he said softly. "Don't pretend you don't want me too." I pushed him back, panic flaring in my chest. "Stop. He's upstairs. We can't." "You already did," he interrupted. "And you'll come back to me. You can't help it." I stared at him, horrified by the truth in his words, and horrified by how right he might be. I locked myself in the bathroom that night. The sound of the shower running upstairs, Mark humming faintly, unaware, felt like another world entirely. I sank to the cold tiles, my arms wrapped around my knees. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, trying to slow my breathing, trying to remember who I was before that moment. Before the look in Eli's eyes rewrote every boundary I thought I had. What was happening to me? I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my features pale, unfamiliar. I looked like a woman unraveling, and I was. Days passed. I avoided Eli as best I could. I filled the silence with routine laundry, long walks, podcasts I barely listened to. I told myself it would pass, that this madness would burn itself out. But it didn't. If anything, it grew sharper, hungrier. Eli didn't make it easy. He didn't corner me again, not right away, but he was always there. A hand brushing mine when no one was looking. A whispered comment that made my breath catch. A glance that made my skin prickle. He was bold in the way only someone who knew he had power could be. And the worst part? I let him. I hated myself for it. Mark started noticing my distance. He reached for me in bed and I flinched. He asked if something was wrong, if work had gotten to me, if maybe I needed time away. No, I told him, just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was breaking. One evening, Mark left to meet some colleagues for drinks. I thought I'd have the house to myself, finally a moment to breathe. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, trying to lose myself in an old movie. Something predictable. Safe. That illusion shattered the moment Eli appeared in the doorway. He wore only a pair of low-hanging sweatpants, his chest bare, damp hair curling at the edges. He didn't speak, just looked at me with that same dark intensity that had haunted my dreams for weeks. I froze. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, the blanket pulled away in a swift motion. Before I could protest, his mouth was on mine. And I let it happen. I told myself it was the last time, that once it was out of our systems, we'd return to normal. But there was nothing normal about the way he touched me, nothing that could be undone by guilt or time. It didn't happen in the bedroom. It didn't need candles or soft music. It was raw, desperate on the living room couch, with my heart pounding in my throat and his breath hot against my skin. We didn't speak. Not during. Not after. There was nothing left to say. That's when the front door opened. Mark's voice called out, cheerful, muffled by his shoes scuffing the floor. He was early. So early. Eli heard him first. He pulled away just in time for Mark to step into the living room. He stopped, stared at my disheveled clothes, the air still thick with something unspoken, the look on Eli's face. And everything crumbled. Claire, he said, his voice breaking on my name. I stood frozen, shame painting every inch of me. I can explain, I tried to say, but there were no words, no explanation, just silence. Mark backed away as though the walls themselves had turned to fire. He didn't shout, didn't rage. He just left out the door, into the night. Gone. I collapsed to the floor, the weight of it all crushing my chest. My marriage, my identity, the life I had worked so hard to hold together, it all shattered in that single, irreversible moment. Eli stood there, unmoved. This was always going to happen, he said quietly. You just didn't want to admit it. I screamed at him, told him to get out. And for once, he listened. He left without another word. And I sat there, alone, in the dim light of the living room, surrounded by broken pieces I didn't know how to put back together. Mark never came back. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. I waited, for a while. I thought maybe he just needed space, time to process what he had seen. I left voicemails, wrote texts I never sent, stared at the front door for hours like he might walk through it again. But deep down, I knew he was gone. I had shattered something in him, something sacred, and no amount of apology could unbreak it. The house felt different now, hollow, like even the walls didn't know what to do with me. Eli avoided me at first. He stayed in his room, came and went quietly, eyes unreadable. The storm had passed, and in its wake was a silence far worse than yelling. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I walked through the house like a ghost, haunted by my own choices. And yet, every time I heard his footsteps, my breath caught. Every time he brushed past me in the hallway, some cruel part of me lit up like dried leaves catching fire. I hated it. I hated me. I tried to busy myself again gardening, sorting through closets, scrubbing already clean floors. Nothing helped. There was no peace to be found in routine now, only reminders. Eli began testing the waters again. A hand on the small of my back when passing by. A whisper in my ear when no one was around. Filthy, unrelenting words that twisted like vines around my spine. You still want me, he said once, his breath warm against my neck. You're just scared. And I was, but not of him. I was scared of how right he was, how badly my body still betrayed me, despite the shame flooding my veins. One afternoon, I found him in the kitchen, making coffee like it was any other day. He looked up and smiled genuine this time. Not mocking, not dark, just human. "Do you want some?" he asked, holding out a mug. I nodded, too tired to speak. I took it and sat across from him at the table, the silence between us heavier than anything he could have said. After a moment, he leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, "I never meant for it to happen like that." I looked at him then, truly looked, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his bravado, the uncertainty. "We can't undo it," I whispered. "I know," he replied. We said nothing more, but the weight of that moment settled between us, like a stone dropped into deep water. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had veered so far off course. I had made mistakes before, sure, but none this deep, none this permanent. I didn't know what to do with myself anymore, with this guilt, with this hunger, with the memory of Mark's face broken in the doorway, and the terrible lingering heat of Eli's touch still pulsing under my skin. I got up, walked to the mirror. My reflection stared back older, wearier, hollow-eyed, not the woman I used to be. But maybe that woman had never really existed. Maybe this was who I had been all along, waiting for the right kind of storm to show it. Weeks passed. Life settled into something that resembled normal, but only in the way a shattered vase might still hold a few drops of water. The shape was gone, the substance leaking. Mark filed for divorce. The papers came in a flat envelope on a Wednesday, as unceremonious as a bank statement. No message, no note. Just signatures and silence. I signed without crying. There were no tears left. Eli still lived under the same roof. We moved like two actors performing in a play no one had written. Sometimes we spoke about groceries, the dog barking next door, the weather. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. But it was there, always. The undercurrent. One night, I found him standing outside on the back porch, leaning on the railing, the last of the sunlight casting gold across his features. He didn't turn when he heard me, just sipped from a bottle of water, eyes on the horizon. "I'm leaving," he said quietly. "Next week." I didn't ask why, didn't ask where. I just nodded, the ache blooming in my chest quietly, almost gratefully. He turned to me, expression unreadable. "I thought you should know." "Thank you," I said. For what? I didn't know. For the warning? For the pain? For the strange, impossible chapter we had written together? Maybe for all of it. He stepped closer, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so soft, it nearly undid me. "You changed me," he whispered. "I don't know if that's a good thing." "It was real," he said. "You can't pretend it wasn't." I swallowed hard. "No, I can't." He kissed me then, not desperate, not wild, but slow. Final. A goodbye without words. And just like that, we knew. We weren't going to see each other again. The morning he left, I didn't come down to say goodbye. I heard the front door close. I heard his car pull away. I stood at the window after, waiting to feel relief. It didn't come, but neither did regret. Not in the way I expected. Yes, I had destroyed something good, something stable. I had stepped across a line no one should, but I had also been more alive in those moments, terrified, furious, consumed than I had been in years. And now? Now there was only the quiet. I spent the rest of the summer alone. I picked the weeds in the garden, painted the guest bedroom, learned to sleep with the window open again. Sometimes I thought about Eli, about the way he had looked at me like I was something wild, something not yet tamed. And sometimes, late at night, I thought about Mark, about what I'd taken from him, about the part of me that might never forgive myself. But I never thought of going back. The past had its place, and so did I. Here, in this silence, in this aftermath, in the life I would build, brick by broken brick. And maybe, someday, that would be enough.